If you've become obsessed with Elden Ring, that immense world full of secrets, challenging combats, and an atmosphere that makes you lose hours exploring, then get ready. Today, we're going to dive into 10 new games that capture that same spirit. Mysterious worlds, epic battles, and that constant sense of discovery that only a good Souls-like can deliver. I'm Matthew, and the video is about to start. Ballad of Antara is the kind of novelty that makes you look twice if you're hooked on Elden Ring or Souls-like in general. Especially because here, the proposal is bold and full of mystery. When the trailer appeared by surprise, the first thing that caught the eye was the dark fantasy atmosphere. Devastated scenarios, a mysterious fog that swallows everything, and creatures that seem to have jumped straight out of a Miyazaki nightmare. All of this tied together by a narrative that mixes the search for essences, lands in ruins, and that sense of urgency that only games of this style convey. Speaking of gameplay, Ballad of Antara also bets on the formula that consecrated the genre: measured and punitive combat, with the right to defenses, dodges, and parries right in the critical window. The guard and posture bar system is present, requiring precision in confrontations. Each enemy has attacks with visual signals that force you to read animations and understand the rhythm of combat. What also caught my attention was the fact that the companions use special abilities during battles, giving that air of group combat. Although, from the first impressions, the AI of the partners still leaves something to be desired. One of the strengths, from what has already been shown, is the variety of environments and creatures. In a few minutes of gameplay, you go from abandoned areas to places that come to life before our eyes, with blue flowers and flying creatures coming out of nowhere. It's a contrast between beauty and bizarreness that is quite unique. The visual highlight is due to the Unreal Engine 5, which really creates breathtaking scenarios, half desolate, half fascinating. Some even compare the beauty of the game with the awaited Black Myth Wukong. Ballad of Antara arrives as free-to-play, which is rare for games of this type. This brings the advantage of easy and immediate access, but also raises the alert about how the monetization will be, something that still generates discussions in the community. After all, nobody wants a Souls-like with paywall or invasive microtransactions. The cooperative multiplayer for up to 3 people is another interesting differential. You can face bizarre bosses and explore the world in a group, which can add layers of strategy beyond the traditional solitude of Souls-like. The protagonist, Gassar, and other playable characters promise varied styles, each with different abilities and elements. This system of switching between characters can bring a good dose of experimentation for those who enjoy testing different builds and combos, something that usually makes the experience more dynamic and personal. The rest points exist. Instead of the traditional fires, they are golden plants, a creative solution to maintain the ritual of saving, recovering, and preparing for the next challenge. For those who live in search of that feeling of unexpected discoveries, challenging bosses, and engaging lore, Ballad of Antara promises exactly that. A new world, full of mysteries and dangers, for those who can't resist the Souls-like vibe. It's worth keeping an eye on every new piece of information, mainly because the launch is scheduled for 2026, and if it delivers everything it's promising, it could be the next big name for those who loved Elden Ring and want that mix of fascination and fear again every time they cross an unknown corner. The Relic, First Guardian, is that Souls-like that caught me right away for the dark and dense atmosphere of the world of Arsiltis, where each step seems to carry the weight of a tragic and dark legend. The atmosphere, inspired by Korean folklore, creates a scenario as cruel as it is fascinating, which goes beyond the visual. The environment and narrative intertwine, giving a unique tone that is not just another world in ruins of the genre. In combat, I felt that typical challenge of the best Souls-likes, with a heavy focus on stamina management, timing for parry and dodge, and a system that makes each hit and block really matter. The combined influence of Elden Ring and Sekiro appears clear, especially in the weight of the battles and the importance of breaking the resistance of enemies to cause real damage. It's a punitive but fair system, which requires dedication and patience. The game brings a semi-open structure that mixes exploration and narrative in an interesting way. You don't get lost in a giant and labyrinthine map, but you find an interconnected world with hidden secrets, complex dungeons, and paths that only reveal themselves after certain discoveries. This brings an experience that balances freedom and focus, ideal for those who enjoy a good challenge and hidden rewards. One of the points that most caught my attention was the character customization and progression via runes and crafting instead of fixed classes. This allows you to adapt your style in the way you want, whether focusing on agility, brute force, or magic, and creates a feeling of who is really shaping their own guardian to face the threats. Each fragment of the relic that you collect is not only progress in the game, but also adds layers of lore and power to the narrative. Visually, the game is impressive, with graphics that highlight the brutality and gothic beauty of the universe. The dynamic lighting and the meticulous details in the armor and enemies contribute to a deep immersion. In addition, the sound design with anguished screams and an immersive soundtrack intensifies that feeling of always being on the verge of danger, something that Souls-like fans value a lot. The Relic First Guardian is scheduled for release in early 2026 for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. And for me, it has everything to be one of the great bets of the genre in this cycle. If you are one of those who enjoy games with sharp combat, a dense world to explore, and an engaging narrative vibe, it has to be on your radar, especially for those who loved Elden Ring and seek something that complements this experience with a touch of folklore and Korean brutality.
Fishermen returned from the sea, and Lena, who worked Lena with her hands, we're not soldiers.
If you pass through this warehouse toward the church, you'll find the children.
He left. The priest stood blocking the door, but that laughter, it was more terrifying than any words.
At the end of every journey, a boss awaits. The Relic features more than 70 bosses, but they are not mere enemies. Each carries a personal tale, a story of sorrow and tragedy. Defeating a boss grants special items, along with their personal journal. Within its pages lies their life, and why they were doomed to become a monster.
Soulframe is an MMORPG that has been attracting attention mainly for its unique mix between the combat style that resembles Souls-like and a setting that refers to the theme of fantasy, but with a broader and even a little different touch than fans expect from a traditional Souls-like. The game does not bring the same punitive vibe or that sense of high risk that Elden Ring provides, but in return, it delivers a very fluid and dynamic movement system, which makes exploring the world and facing enemies something really engaging. The combat, despite having some inspiration in the Souls-like style, is more accessible, without a traditional stamina system, and this changes the rhythm of the battles a lot, allowing more free attacks and dodges without the weight of resource limitation. The world of Soulframe has a very powerful vibe, with that fantasy touch where nature is at stake, threatened by mysterious forces coming from the sky, giving an environmental context that unfolds in an interesting way in the mechanics and environmental narrative. These aspects leave the game's universe full of personality, even though the greater focus is on exploration and combat, with procedurally generated dungeons that promise a lot of variety of challenges, including puzzles, elaborate bosses, and secrets for those who like to delve deeper. For those who are fans of Warframe, they will recognize that care with the social environment of the game, where you have areas shared with other players, creating this balance between the MMO and the more intensive gameplay. The customization and progression in the game give a lot of freedom for the player to choose their style. There are several classes and perk trees to develop, which pleases those who like to invest in builds and such, and the absence of a classic punitive system, no losing XP when dying, makes the progress more fluid, without that typical frustration of Souls-likes. The game also stands out for the use of magic and weapons with special abilities, where you have everything from melee to ranged attacks and interesting spells, which complement the mechanics and make the battles more strategic and varied. Visually, Soulframe impresses with the graphic quality and the artistic design that delivers both beautiful areas and threatening scenarios. The lighting, weather effects, and details of the world help to build an immersion that grabs, even if some character animations sound a little robotic or floating in certain moments, which can improve with time and updates. The soundtrack and sound design help to amplify the dramatic sensation, especially in encounters with bosses and more tense areas. Another interesting point is the concept of the Nightfold, a safe and alternative place where players can level up and customize their characters at any time. Something that breaks a little the tradition of the fixed spawn of checkpoints and gives the player more freedom to breathe in the middle of the raids through dangerous areas. This approach creates a modern dynamic in the experience without losing the essence of the action RPG, trying to please both more hardcore fans and those who want a less frustrating journey. Soulframe is still in pre-alpha, with closed release for more tests, and the full release seems to be projected for 2026, initially for PC, with future possibility of consoles. From what is already available, the game may not be the direct successor of traditional Souls-likes, but it is certainly a modern, interesting, and well-polished alternative for those who enjoy RPG games with strategic combat and rich environments to explore. Especially for Warframe fans looking for something with more focus on melee and fantasy. For those who loved Elden Ring, it's worth paying attention, as Soulframe brings its own vibe that mixes challenge with accessibility in a living world to be discovered.
When it was gathered, no one watched. The Everstorm!
Eldrimar is a game that mixes elements of action RPG, adventure, and even survival horror, which already gives it a unique tone within the universe of Souls-likes. The game is in first person, which already changes the experience a lot compared to titles like Elden Ring, creating a direct immersion and an even heavier feeling of being inside that dark and cruel world, where each step can be fatal. The atmosphere is really dark and oppressive, with detailed settings and spectacular lighting that add an extra layer of tension and mystery that grabs from beginning to end. In combat, Eldrimar stands out for its brutality and the need for care in every movement. The enemies are challenging and frequent, which reinforces that bullet sponge style that requires you to learn patterns and dedicate total attention to survive. The gameplay requires patience and a good dose of strategy, since each confrontation can be a test of resistance, reflexes, and skill, especially against bosses who have memorable moments, despite some criticisms about the lack of variety in certain encounters. The feeling that remains is that the game honors its classic influences, but also tries, with some success, to introduce its own identity within the genre. The first-person exploration strengthens the immersion, but at the same time imposes a more realistic and contained rhythm. The character's walk is slower, which makes the attention to the details of the environment redoubled, and the decisions are more thought out. This realistic rhythm, combined with space limitations in certain maps, can sometimes frustrate, but it also brings that oppressive atmosphere that many like in a survival horror vibe, something that mixes very well with the dark narrative and the dark setting of the game. The progression happens through a system that weighs skills, equipment, and a variety of options to customize your playstyle, going beyond the traditional classes and allowing each player to find their ideal way to face the horrors of the world of Eldrimar. The feeling I had was of a more raw and realistic RPG, where it is not enough to go out cutting everything, but to think about each step and each investment of points, with a learning curve that can be challenging, but it is rewarding for those who enjoy it. Eldrimar is a spectacle for fans of the genre, delivering scenarios that are simultaneously beautiful and scary, with an enemy and environment design that are dense in details and atmosphere. The dynamic lighting, the use of shadows and weather effects increase the impact of the immersion, making you really feel that that world is hostile and full of hidden secrets, something that at every moment leaves the desire to continue playing to discover more. For those who are fans of Elden Ring and are looking for an experience that offers something different, Eldrimar can be a great choice, especially if you enjoy games with a more personal and intense vibe, where the first-person immersion helps to amplify the dark atmosphere and the constant challenge. Despite still being in development, the game already shows personality and tradition, bringing that feeling that each combat and discovery is worth it for those who like to explore dense, difficult, and atmospheric universes, with a touch of suspense and horror that few Souls-likes have.
Remember your purpose. You are Sauron, the warrior of Azator. You are the sword of vengeance in the hands of your race. It is you who will invade the mortal realm and unlock the great portal. The time has come to reclaim our world.
The Duskbloods is an interesting bet from Software that mixes the universe of Souls-likes with a multiplayer PvPvE experience, bringing a gothic vampire vibe loaded with mystery and tension. The game takes place in a dark and decadent world, full of aesthetic references that resemble Bloodborne, especially the dark Victorian atmosphere with imposing structures such as cathedrals and cities that evoke Anor Londo. The narrative seems to revolve around characters who possess supernatural powers granted by a mysterious blood, which ties the setting to a conflict between rival factions in search of what they call First Blood. The gameplay of the Duskbloods is an evolution of the Souls-like style for multiplayer, with matches of up to 8 players who can both compete with each other and face monstrous creatures scattered around the map. This dynamic creates a delicate balance between PvP and PvE, where each player needs to be cautious not only with the enemies controlled by artificial intelligence, but also with other players who seek to eliminate and steal resources and rewards conquered. The combats are intense and strategic. Fast movement, double jumps, sprint, and the possibility of summoning companions make the gameplay even more dynamic and different from the traditional solo Souls-like. The customization of the characters in the Duskbloods is deep and affects not only the skills and equipment, but also the personal history of each Bloodsworn. This deep customization offers variety to experiment with different builds and playstyles, enriching the replayability and engagement in multiplayer matches. In addition, the game presents dynamic events during the matches that change the environment and add new objectives, making each match a unique and unpredictable experience. The game impresses with its detailed Gothic design and a careful mix between steampunk elements and classic horror. The setting is loaded, with closed and claustrophobic places, and grandiose external scenarios that complement well the dark tone of the game. The enemies and bosses demonstrate creativity and scary design, maintaining the tradition of From Software games in creating memorable and challenging adversaries, which helps to keep the player always attentive and immersed. The multiplayer experience is reinforced by the map design and mechanics that encourage interaction. More than simple combats, there are strategies involving stealth, collection, and territory control that resemble games like Hunt Showdown. The possibility of temporary alliances, personal rivalries, and defined roles for each player propose a narrative layer of their own for each session, increasing the intensity and unpredictability of the confrontations. Scheduled to be exclusive to the Nintendo Switch 2, and with a release in 2026, the Duskbloods promises to break paradigms by mixing the Souls-like style with a competitive and cooperative multiplayer approach that can please both fans of the Souls genre and players interested in challenging and strategic PvPvE. If you enjoy Elden Ring and are looking for a different experience focused on the interaction between players within a dark, Victorian atmosphere with supernatural touches, this is a game that deserves your attention.
And one alone.
Project the Perceiver is a title that blends the best of Souls-like with an impressive open-world structure set in a fantasy inspired by ancient China. The story revolves around an unnamed protagonist who dies before finishing his play and is resurrected by a mysterious mask that transforms him into a kind of masked ghost, ready to follow a journey of revenge and deep discoveries about conflicting beliefs. This premise brings a dramatic and political tone to the game, something that differentiates it from the traditional narratives of the genre, promising, in addition to combat, a quite rich and engaging narrative immersion. On the gameplay front, the inspiration from Sekiro and Ghost of Tsushima is clear, but Project the Perceiver brings its own identity by allowing the player to use different weapons, from fast katanas to heavy greatswords, and even unique abilities that involve jumping against walls and unusual transformations, such as into flowers, that reflect the game's mythology. The combat requires skills to master parries, dodges, and well-calculated attacks, maintaining that measured and demanding rhythm that Souls-like fans love, but with a more fluid and open touch that the world explores. The open world is one of its strongest points, full of domains to explore and secrets to unravel, with highly detailed and varied scenarios created using Unreal Engine 5, which makes everything visually stunning and environmentally immersive. The feeling of a living world, enveloped in chaos and incessant battles between rival factions, gives the sensation that you are inside a Chinese epic, and this is reflected in the richness of the characters and missions encountered along the way. Progression in the game involves consolidating beliefs and ideals into powerful masks, each bringing distinct abilities that affect combat and exploration, which adds a lot of strategic layers for those who like builds and customization. This approach also confers a certain novelty to the genre, deviating from the traditional system of levels and points, placing more focus on the narrative and the player's choice to shape their playstyle. Visually, there is no denying that the game impresses with its graphic quality and smooth animations, combined with landscapes and environments that transition between the mystical and the warrior. The artistic design brings a balance between tradition and modernity, providing an experience that is both familiar to Souls-like fans and totally refreshing for those seeking innovation. This, combined with the atmospheric soundtrack, creates the perfect atmosphere for the legendary battles and moments of silent exploration. With a release scheduled for PlayStation 5 and PC in 2026, still without a fixed date, Project The Perceiver promises to be a highlight among Souls-likes for its mix of combat styles, intense narrative, and open world full of possibilities. For those who loved Elden Ring, this game is essential to keep an eye on, as it unites that sense of technical challenge with a rich plot and a unique cultural setting, offering an experience that may very well consolidate itself as one of the great action RPGs of the next generation.
天下易主，救星不存，你还能为何而战？大唐之命系于4年，人在则唐不灭。天下是苍生的天下，梁还是唐，这2个字重要吗？大唐福泽万年，逆贼杀戮无道，如何相提并论？一将功成万骨枯，总有人要在阴影里背负罪孽。 你那戏里的唐，真是你心中所念的唐吗？
Beast of Reincarnation is that Souls-like action RPG that surprises for being the work of Game Freak, known for Pokemon, but here delivering a very different and darker experience. Set in a post-apocalyptic Japan taken over by corruption, monsters, and rusty machines, the game puts you in the role of Emma, a cursed warrior who has her faithful canine companion Ku by her side. This partnership reinforces the emotional aspect of the plot, where each step in the devastated world is a fight for both survival and redemption. The combat is technical and challenging, inspired by titles like Sekiro and Nioh, with blows that require rhythm, precision, and absolute control of the stamina bar. The sensation of each attack, defense, and parry is heavy and rewarding, transmitting that visceral feeling that every Souls-like fan seeks, where making a mistake can cost your life, but getting it right brings enormous satisfaction. In addition, the combat is complemented by Emma's unique abilities, which involve powers linked to vines and natural elements, which gives an extra strategic layer to the battles. The world of Beast of Reincarnation is mutable and alive, with climatic changes and natural cycles that affect the environment and the behavior of enemies. The landscape is a fascinating mixture between abandoned technology and the return of nature, where forests can swallow urban ruins and lost spirits wander among uncontrolled machines. This creates an atmospheric scenario where exploring each corner can reveal both dangers and hidden narratives, which gives depth to the experience. Stopping to meet the spirits and yokais that inhabit this universe is essential, as they carry stories and secrets that make each confrontation more personal and meaningful. They are not simply enemies to be defeated, but echoes of the past that interact with you, increasing the feeling that Emma is not only fighting against monsters, but against her own history and destiny. This creates an emotional layer rare to see in games of the genre, highlighting the narrative as an integral part of the gameplay. The game impresses with its detailed art and the sound atmosphere that intensifies each moment of the game, from the whisper of the winds to the collisions of swords. The battles against giant machines and wild beasts are grandiose and tactical, requiring total attention and constant adaptation, while the artistic design creates a harmony between the beautiful and the terrifying, which keeps the player tense and curious at the same time. With a release scheduled for 2026 on Xbox Game Pass and other platforms, V.E.D.A of Reincarnation positions itself as a Souls-like that brings freshness to the genre, combining demanding combat with a deep narrative and a living and mutable world. For those who fell in love with Elden Ring, but want something that unites emotion, technical challenge, and a strong relationship between protagonist and companion, this game promises to be one of the most striking and innovative experiences of the next year.
Fujigo Emma, お前こそが輪廻の獣を滅ぼす刃となる。
Withering Realms is an action RPG that mixes terror, survival horror, and Souls-like elements, bringing a dense and atmospheric experience that escapes the conventional of the genre. You control Clover, a ghost girl, accompanied by her doll guardian, on a journey that takes place in 1926 in a mysterious city called Pinwheel, surrounded by cemeteries, tombs, and decadent mansions. The gothic and dark setting, combined with a narrative of hidden mystery, creates a suffocating atmosphere that combines very well with the tension of the battles and the detailed exploration of the world. In combat, the game has a Souls-like vibe, but with a system where you can evolve specific parts of the doll's body, such as arms and legs, creating personalized builds that directly impact the gameplay. While Clay focuses on horror with fixed angles and stealth, the doll is the arm of action, facing varied enemies with weapons and magic, creating an interesting contrast between intense action and moments of psychological terror. In addition, the game does not have a traditional skill tree, giving more focus to the choice of equipment and talismans to shape your playstyle. The difference between playing during the day or at night is striking. During the day, the natural light and the environment allow you to explore freely, but when night falls, the world becomes practically dark, and violent and frightening creatures appear, requiring lanterns, spells, and an attentive ear to detect imminent threats, raising the level of tension and preparing the ground for truly scary moments, as if you were inside a classic survival horror. Exploration is a fundamental part, with many secret locations, materials for crafting, and magical artifacts to discover, encouraging the player to investigate every corner of the city and its surroundings to unravel secrets and improve their arsenal. The presence of the day and night cycle transforms the way you interact with the environment and plan your raids, keeping the experience fresh and challenging with each new game session. Visually, the game stands out for the detailed design of the city of Pinwheel and its decadent and dark environments that transition between the Gothic and the Noir, with realistic physical lighting that dramatically differentiates the phases of the day and night. This care with the atmosphere is reinforced by the soundtrack and sound effects that create a complete immersion, amplifying the feeling of constant danger and mystery in the air. Withering Realms is scheduled for release in 2026 for PC and consoles, and has everything to be a highlight for Souls-like fans who are looking for an experience that combines the technical challenge of the genre with a scary plot and a deep setting, especially for those who enjoy horror stories wrapped in mysteries and secrets to be unraveled. If you enjoyed Elden Ring and want something that unites the wonderful challenge with constant fear, this is a game that deserves your attention. Prison of Husks is that indie Souls-like that draws attention especially for the PS1 style visual, with low poly graphics and resolution that bring a very cool nostalgia for those who enjoy classic games, but with a modern challenge. Set in an artistically painted afterlife, it puts you in the shoes of a doll who wakes up in a dark prison in search of her beloved. The setting mixes the melancholic with the strange, a world that seems at the same time beautiful and decadent, with an intricate level design that resembles the first games of From Software and even elements of Silent Hill, creating a tense atmosphere full of secrets to explore. The combat is aggressive and direct, encouraging an offensive posture where quick dodges allow you to both approach and open space easily. This system brings an interesting novelty. When blocking, dodging, and attacking at the right time, you fill an adrenaline bar that increases your damage, but also makes you take more damage, creating a constant tension to maintain the rhythm and avoid mistakes that can be fatal. The mechanics are very fluid and make you physically tense in each confrontation, because any slip can turn the game around in an instant. The exploration of the prison and its labyrinthine corridors is a highlight of the game, with a design that encourages the discovery of shortcuts, hidden items, and secrets. Some doors are locked, and you need to find keys or specific items to proceed, increasing the feeling of adventure and investigation. The demo, which is already available, shows small areas that seem much larger due to the intelligent level design, promoting a sense of constant discovery that is a differential for those who like games that reward curiosity. Prison of Husks mixes the charm of the old with an atmosphere that is more expressive than technical, using shadows and fog to maintain suspense and mystery. The design of the enemies is peculiar and deserves attention, because despite being simple in the polygons, they bring a real challenge due to their attack patterns and agility. The sound setting complements with subtle sounds and environment that elevate the climate of tension and isolation, making each step seem heavy and loaded with intention. The game also brings a system of construction and combination of items that can be explored to create equipment and consumables that help in battles. The absence of a traditional leveling system also leaves the focus more on the player's ability to adapt and make good use of the available tools, characteristics that consolidate the experience as something challenging and rewarding. Prison of Husks promises to be a gem for those who love the Souls-like vibe with a retro and artistic touch, bringing a dense world full of atmosphere and tough challenges. If you are a fan of Elden Ring, but want something that transports you to a different universe, more minimalist and loaded with nostalgia, this game is a sure bet that is already making waves. The indie scene. Especially for those who like to explore, get lost, and learn with each step of the way. V.E.D.A. The Awakening of Souls is a Souls-like that catches the attention for being, in fact, a training game inside a simulator created by a super artificial intelligence called V.E.D.A. You start without memory, in a controlled environment that serves to improve your combat skills, offering a unique experience that is both challenging and didactic, allowing both veterans of the genre and novices to familiarize themselves with the systems. The combat brings that classic feeling of Souls-likes, with light and heavy attacks, dodges, blocks, and parries that require precision and timing. But the differential is in the overclock bar that fills up while you attack, and that allows you to unleash powerful blows with impactful animations. The mechanics of fatal attacks, where you need to position yourself strategically to cause more damage and heal yourself, adds an interesting tactical layer, forcing you to think before acting to maximize efficiency in battles. The game also stands out for the roguelike structure, with rooms that are reorganized with each attempt, challenging the player to adapt their strategy in a dynamic scenario. This combination of Souls-like with roguelike brings a dynamic of high risks and rewards, where progression is built through the collection of weapons, modules, and equipment, making each trajectory unique and personalized according to your choices. Visually, V.E.D.A. delivers a futuristic environment with a mysterious and minimalist touch, where the aesthetics of the simulator reinforces the feeling that everything is a constant test. The sound setting and visual effects amplify this feeling of tension and total focus, making each combat seem almost a test of skills and mental resistance. The narration and the challenges that appear along the way create an immersive script even within this artificial universe. The progression system is solid, focused on different modules for weapons and equipment, with levels that increase strength, resistance, and special abilities. This customization allows you to build the character in a very strategic way, mixing more aggressive or defensive fighting styles according to the player's taste. In addition, the game does not penalize death as much as the classics of the genre, offering a more accessible experience which encourages you to try again and learn from your mistakes. For those looking for an introduction to the Souls-like world or want to train their skills in a controlled environment, V.E.D.A. The Awakening of Souls is a different and promising proposal. With a release scheduled for PS5, PC, and other platforms in 2026, it is a great bet for those who enjoy the challenge, the exploration, and want to improve their reflexes and strategies in combat, without losing the immersion and the typical tension of the genre.